Hi everyone, good day. If you're watching this particular video, it means that you are entering the topic of identity and intercultural communication. Okay, with that, I would like to inform you in the syllabus or the module outline, or we call it module information that you have read or I've explained. Week 6 and 7 is devoted to identity and intercultural communication. One, then it follows by identity and intercultural communication two on week 7. But I took the liberty of merging the whole topic together. So week 6 and week 7, you only watch this particular one video only. So we cover everything in this particular video. So I'm pretty excited to actually start my video lectures. So let's begin. All right, identity and intercultural communication. Let's go. Okay, when we talk about identity itself, it is important to know who we are, and identity is also who others think we are. Okay, and the definition is the concept of who we are. Characteristics of identity may be understood differently depending on the perspectives that people take. For example, social science, interpretive, or critical perspective. So basically, identity is the concept of who we are, but how we channel our identity in intercultural communication itself, it can be understood through through three perspectives, which is social science, interpretive, or critical perspective that we will go through together in the next slides. Okay, so how do we actually communicate ourselves to others? Sorry, the typo right here, not communication, but communicate. Communicate. Fine. Okay, how do we communicate? That's TE, communicate, yeah? How do we communicate ourselves to others? How do how do we actually do that? How do we actually talk to people from, how do you talk to your lecturer? How do you talk to your father? The identity when you talk to different people, it gives practically different identity when you talk to different people in different situations. Okay, and with that, it comes to the foundation of impression management theory, which defines as the ways by which individuals attempt to control the impressions others have of them. So when we talk about impression management theory, right? We as a person, when we meet other people, we want to actually we want to actually look good, or we don't want people to actually think bad of us. So what we do is we control ourselves. So for example, as simple as going on the first date. Okay, you have a date with a guy or a girl, and you try to control yourself on the first date because you don't want to reveal too much about you. If then the person will straightly go away. If for instance, me, I like to control people, so I hope I did not do that kind of thing when I met my husband on my first date, because the previous dates that I went, I showed my fangs that I like to control people. So that's why every guy actually, ran off, and thank God my husband married me. Okay, so we try to actually control our identity with different people. So for example, going on a blind date, you're a different identity. You wear a different hat. When you're with your mother, okay, you're a different hat because you're with your mother knows you, your father knows you, so most probably the identity or your true self is with the people that you know from small. Okay, from when you were born. Okay, And that's how impression management theory is. Okay, so as I mentioned before, there are three perspectives of identity and communication. The first one will be social science, whereby it is created by self and by relating to groups. The second, and the first one will be through family, individual, family, and spiritual self. We will go through each of these later in the next lines. Second of all would be interpretive, which is identity formed through communication with others. And the third one would be critical, which is identity shaped through social and historical forces. So don't get confused right here. I'm going to go through one by one with you. We are going through together. So hopefully we will get it and get the meaning across together. Okay. And the first one, which is the social science perspective. Identity is created by in part by self and group membership. Okay, so when we talk about who we are, the self is composed of multiple identities, which is cultural bound. Like I mentioned before, the function of a daughter, you and your mom would be a different identity. The function of you as a student with your lecturer would be a different identity. And do we come to understand who we are? Because we come from various cultural backgrounds and we encounter with all sorts of different people in different situations almost every day. So do we understand who we are? Do you understand who you are? Share with me. Okay. And going to the next one, which is okay. This is a very, very interesting part whereby, still under the social science perspective of identity. Okay, that's important. So, what happened is that, under the social science perspective, this particular psychologist by the name of Alan Rowland, okay, he came up with a theory or concepts, okay, whereby there are three universal aspects of identity present in all individuals. So the first one, which is individualized identity, the sense of self as independent and self-reliant. Sometimes you develop who you are by yourself, and it takes time for you to actually know, what do you actually, what do I like actually? What am I good at? So that's individualized identity. And at the end of the day, when you realize that and you can pick up that on your own, that is where your individualized identity comes in. The second of all would be familial identity, is the sense of self as always connected to family and purpose, whereby your relationship with your family is different because you tend to open yourself more with your family. I don't know, but different people have different relationships with family, whereby they're a little bit distant. They're a little bit distant with your family members. So it depends. Back again to the way that you were brought up. Okay. And the third one would be spiritual identity, identification with feelings of connected to others and higher meanings in life. So when we talk about identity itself, okay, and summary, individualized identity, you realize who you are. Familial identity, the self that the sense of self that how you connect with your family and your family members as well. And the third one would be spiritual identity, whereby you feel connected to a higher belief, which is religion. You connect to God, for instance. Okay, so what Alan Rowland would like to tell the society, to the intercultural communication society, to the intercultural society, that an individual is made up of individualized identity, family is important, and religion is important. So what that is what individual, or how your identity develop. That is what Alan Rowland mentioned in his concepts. Okay, if you have questions on this part, please let me know. Okay. Moving on, people, we have another one, which is identity negotiation theory. Okay, by Ting Toomey, it's a theory that emphasizes the process of communicating one's own desired identities while reinforcing or resisting others' identities as the core of intercultural communication. Okay, sometimes in identity itself, okay, identity itself, when you communicate with other people, you negotiate your identity. So for example, if a majority of the okay, for example, let's say, um when the lecturer asks you at the end of the class, do you have any questions? Okay, you actually have a question. You're like dying to ask a question, but because of the majority of the class does not raise their hands, you negotiate with your identity and say you too don't have any question. So you know, negotiate with yourself, you know, just to save face and not to just, be a little bit outstanding than others. Okay, some that is an example, one example. And another example would be to accept, okay, any agreement on anything. So for example, um or no, let me take an example of rejecting something. Okay, sometimes you are let's say you are an individual of a strong character. Okay, of a strong character, and you would like to say no to that idea, to the majority group of idea. So you say no, so you become outstanding. Okay, so I emphasize again, identity negotiation theory. There are two aspects of it, whereby the first one, you accept the majority's idea, okay, and become a part of the majority, or or you yourself don't agree, you have a strong character, and you become an outstanding, and people will actually look at you because you resist that idea. So it is happening in today's world, so it's normal. So you try to negotiate your identity, your belief towards a particular issue. That is identity negotiation theory. Okay. Questions on this? Most probably everything you have questions. So just ask me questions. Okay? So questions is good. There is no such thing as a stupid question. There is always, when you ask questions, it is always good. That is my philosophy. Okay, and coming to the second approach, or the second perspective on identity, which is the interpretive perspective, it emphasizes that identities are negotiated, co-created, reinforced, and challenged through dual communication with others, and emerge when messages are exchanged between persons. So when we talk about interpretive perspective, does everyone see you as you see yourself? Let me take an example of who I am. I see myself as a simple girl. I'm trying to become better to teach my students. Um, I like teaching students. I have a daughter. Uh, I hope I am a good mom, throughout this 6 months period, because my girl is 6 months old, and that is what I think of myself. I'm still struggling, okay, but what does others actually see, of you? So for example, if you see me, and one perspective would be, oh, you you're like a good mom, whereby you try to do things and you can do nine different things at one time and complete and take care of your child, and you can do lectures and things like that. So you're a hardworking mom. So someone will be like, you're too braggy of yourself. So it depends. Okay, so the most important thing is how do you see yourself? I always believe that we have to stay grounded in whatever means you in whatever means. Okay, so for example, you even though you have a little bit more than other people, you have to actually stay grounded. So it means that you're still in reality, you do reality check of yourself. You never lose yourself. So you want to do that when you think of who you are and developing your identity. Okay. Okay, coming back to interpretive perspective, there is two concepts. Okay, which is the first one, a vowel. Okay, let me take my pen right here. A vowel, the process by which an individual portrays himself or herself. That is the term of a vowel. That that is what a vowel defines as. And ascription, the process by which others attribute identities to an individual. So let's say if you have watched a couple of my videos, you give me one particular identity of who I am. The person who always nags in the video lecture, a nagger identity. I don't know. So, you define me. Okay? One day we're gonna like share, you know, our identities together. Most probably in Zoom meetings and try to ask ourselves who we are and how we describe ourselves. Okay? Okay, so ascription is the process by which others attribute identities to an individual. Okay, coming to the next slide. Central to the perspective is the idea our identities are expressed communicatively. So even though you say that you are not an expressive person, but you do. Okay? Trust me. If you are an introvert person or you feel like you're very robotic, in some way you are expressive or not. If you are not expressive, how would you actually communicate your message to another person, that you don't like the person, that you like the person, or you're angry with your mother, and so forth? So you are communicative. Don't let others define you. Okay. And in core symbols, labels, and norms, we express ourselves through identity. So core symbols is the fundamental beliefs that are shared by the members of cultural group. Labels, a category of core symbols, are names or markers used to classify individuals, social, or cultural groups. So, for example, if you see me because I'm a little bit dark and I have a darker complexion, you won't say that I'm a Chinese lady. So you will say, oh, she's probably Malay, or every time that people see me, a random strangers see me, or it's probably people will actually mistaken me as an Indian because my dad looks like an Indian. Okay, so that is an example. Okay, we go through the third one, which is a critical perspective. It pays particular attention to the societal structures of the institution and to understand identity formation with context of history, economic, politics, and discourse. So when we talk about who we are, okay, who we are, it is depending on the critical perspective as well. So what is our history of our ancestors? For example, my history of ancestors, in terms of politic wise, they have always been supporting no, for example, a political party in Malaysia. Yeah. And how and why do people identify with particular groups and not others? So how do you actually, identify this person with this particular group? So for example, okay, in Malaysia there's so many political parties. Okay, let's say the political example right here. I'm gonna tell you an example of political. Okay, uh if you see, there's so many political parties in Malaysia. We have AMNO, we have Bersatu, we have PAS, we have we have Parti Keadilan Rakyat (PKR), we have DAP Democratic Actions Party, we have Amanah, we have GPS, and other parties as well. Okay, so for example, if your family supports UMNO or Barisan Nasional all through the way, okay, so most likely your identity is belong to because it goes back through the history of your family as well. Okay, and for example, economic wise, in terms, let's look at the let's look at a nation, India, for example. The critical perspective. So, for example, if, like I mentioned in my previous lecture, if an individual uh, is originated, you are originated from a slum in India, most probably, if you trace back your history and your ancestral history, most probably they also live in slums. So to actually change that, you have to triple, double, and work harder to actually get up from the slums and make a change in your, in your identity and your family identity, and become a better, a better surviving society. Okay, that's one. Okay, again, if you have any questions, please ask me through Facebook group or Zoom meeting. Okay, coming to the next one, which is identity and language. Identity is relatable with language, okay, whereby a communication scholar right here, Dolores Talano, describes her own multiple identities reflected in the various labels applied to her. So, for example, the label Spanish, sorry, the label Spanish was applied by her family because she's from Spain. The label Mexican American reflects two important cultures that contribute to her identity. The language again. Latina, the language, reflects cultural and historical connectedness with others of Spanish descent. For example, people from Puerto Rico, people from South America as well. And Chicana is a political and cultural assertiveness in representing her identity. So when we talk about language, it also represents your identity. So for example, the term Malay, you are Malay, and then you most probably have, you can speak Bahasa Malaysia really well. You are a Muslim, that language. It actually, your identity revolves around language as well. Okay, so that is what the example is trying to tell here, whereby each one reveals a different facet of her identity: symbolical, historical, cultural, and political. So everything, there's so many factors to that contributes to who you are today. Will you agree with me on that? Okay, tell me. Okay, coming to the next one, which is identity development issues. Our identity develop over a period of time, always through interaction with others, because when we interact with people, we try, to know who we are. Because if we don't interact with people, can you imagine our society without interaction? That's how hard MCO is without people's interaction. Okay, so only your family members, yeah. Okay, coming back, social science researchers have identified various models that describe how minority and majority identities develop. Okay, let's go through together. So we have a majority, minority identity development, majority, and then we have white culture. Okay, let's go through together. When we talk about in the United States itself, minority groups tend to develop a stronger sense of racial and ethnic identity than majority group members. Okay, when you are not the dominant culture in a particular country, you tend to become a little bit, you're a little bit patriotic about who you are. You are a little bit, stronger in terms of your cultural self. Okay, for example, there are four stages of minority identity development. So, for example, unexamined identity, lack of exploration. In stage one, when we talk about unexamined identity, people explore your identity. They have lack of exploration on your identity. Stage two, conformity, a strong desire to assimilate into and internalize the values and norms of the dominant group. Sometimes when we talk about stage two, people, in minority group would like to be a part of the majority group. The third one would be blanket endorsement of one's group and all the values and attitudes attributed to it. May reject the values and norms of the dominant group. So sometimes, as an individual who comes from a minority identity in a particular nation, you might be stronger in terms of cultural, or you may reject what is the dominant group is saying about particular issues. Sometimes you don't. So it depends back. And stage one is integration, whereby people have a strong sense of their own group identity and appreciation for other cultural groups. Try to reject any angle or forms of racism and oppression from previous stages in more positive ways. So people in minority cultural groups, especially in the United States, they tend to appreciate their culture. So when other cultures are being degraded and things like that, degraded and things like that, they try to understand and empathize, and they try to reject racism in more positive ways. They'd be like much more nicer. Okay, because they know that they come from a minority group. Okay, and the next one would be a majority identity development, whereby majority identity development for members of the dominant group, white group, is modeled at how they might move in unlearning the racism that we unconsciously acquire as we grow up. So when we talk about majority identity development in the United States, it's mostly people who are white are dominating the US. So for example, stage one right here, same as in minority identity development, people do not feel other racial or ethnic groups or feel a sense of superiority in the state. Sorry, this is ethnic. So it means that people in the dominant group feel just the same. They don't feel fear or anything in a society. Second of all, would be acceptance, represent the internalization and acceptance of basic racial inequalities in society. Acceptance is largely unconscious. So when we talk about acceptance of the majority group, normally they accept the society that is around them, all the cultural groups around them, but it depends on your upbringing as well. To say in the US, everybody actually accepts everybody is pretty ideal, because we come from different backgrounds, whereby some of us are a little bit racist, some of us are a little bit ethnocentric towards our own cultural group and things like that. So it's normal. Okay, stage number three represents a major shift from blaming minority members for their conditions to blaming the social system as a source for racial or ethnic problems. Resistance may be passive and may feel embarrassed and ashamed, avoiding or minimize communication with other whites and seeking out interactions with persons of color. So it depends back of how you were brought up. If you come from a white group culture, dominant white group culture, and your parents or your family have a history of you have to be nice to everybody. Doesn't mean that you have to be nice with only white people. Have to be nice to everyone. So you are more acceptance and you seek out interactions with everyone. Okay, some individuals or come from a family which prioritize their cultural group first. So they tend to prioritize themselves. So for example, I'm white, I have the most benefits here in my country, and who are you? You are just taking my benefits away. So for example, like that. And stage number four, redefinition and reintegration. People begin focusing their energy to redefine whiteness in non-racist terms and are finally able to integrate their whiteness into other facets of their identity. So when you see people, especially the white culture group in the United States, nowadays they are not racist at all. Majority of them that I've encountered with with my friends from the United States. So it depends whiteness. People don't actually know it because you're white. Because we are way past that era whereby you're white, I'm a person of color and things like that, especially in the United States. They are past that. Okay, just that the Trump era, President Donald Trump, change that whole ideology of people being white is really important. So yeah, things like that is happening in our cultural group society. Yep. Okay. And the next one, which is characteristics of whiteness. Okay, what does it mean to be white in the United States? If you have any friends from the US, you can actually ask them what are the characteristics of a white identity. So most probably they'll be like, what is that question supposed to be? To be white? Are you racist or something? Sometimes people don't care anymore. People who come from a younger generation, they accept everybody. Okay. Three characteristics US whites share in the particular textbook. Okay, which is an advantage of race privilege, a standpoint from which white people view themselves, others, in society. The third one is a set of cultural practices largely unrecognized by white people. So, what is a culture of white? Can you tell me? Can you share with me if you know? Yeah, share it. Okay, white means rarely or never having to think about it. Most whites don't realize that it is not the experience of many people of color. Most whites don't, let me repeat that again. Most whites don't realize that it's not the experience of many people of color. Sometimes people people who come from the white cultural group don't understand the experience of people who are colored. Them are more defensive of their cultural group. So it depends on how you look at things as well and how you're being brought up. Okay. And we go to social and cultural identities, various types of how you classify yourself. The first one would be gender identity. How do our views on biological sex influence gender identities? Well, gender means different things in different culture. Okay, so gender identity is to differentiate whether you are a man or you are a woman from birth. Okay, so for example, popular culture tells us what it means to be a man and a woman. We begin life with gender identities, the identity that you are born with. Okay, gender is not the same as biological sex. Okay, we will get to that later on. Okay, sexual identity. Okay, sexual identity. How do terms about sexual attraction communicate meanings about sexual identities? How do they communicate value judgments about other sexual identities? So, sexual desires are influenced by attraction to those of other cultures, racial, ethnic backgrounds, ages, and cultural identities. Sexual attraction is complex and makes sexual identities even less categorical. categorizable. Okay, so when we talk about sexual identity, it's uh how do you define yourself? Which, is how do you define yourself? So for example, the first question, how do terms about sexual attraction communicate meaning about sexual identities? If you define your sex preference as, you define your sexual identity as a transgender, for example, you are being born, for example, gender identity would be you are being born as a man, but you have an inclination in your nature, your nature of communication is much more as a woman. So your sexual identity is what? Can you answer me that? Okay. So sometimes sexual identity is also relatable to the person, or to the genders that we like. Okay. So for example, if I like a girl, it means that my sexual identity is lesbian. If I am a man and I like men, my sexual identity is I'm still man. I'm still a man. For example, I'm a man, okay, but I am gay. So for example, okay, so it's very very complex. Okay, so for example, again, with the transgender example, if you are a man at birth and you have an inclination of being a woman, so you like to be a woman. Okay, so you go through a few of processes, and you are a transgender person, a transgender individual. Your sexual identity is a woman. The think, how you think, how you perceive you as what? You are a woman in your brain. You develop that sexual identity. Okay? If you have questions on that, please ask me, which I hope that you have. Okay. Okay, again, the definitions of every concept here, I will put it in another section of notes. Okay? Okay, age identity. How is age viewed in cultures around the world? Age identity is not simply how you feel about your age, but how others treat you based on your age. Sometimes when we talk about age identity itself, it's more of how you bring yourself. So sometimes you have a saying that you don't look like you're 40, but you're actually you don't look like you're 40. Okay, you don't look like you're 40, but you're actually 40, and you bring yourself as a 27-year-old, for example. So the way you bring yourself represents your age. That's why dressing up is good, okay, to show who you are and to feel good about yourself. Okay, racial and ethnic identity. Ethnic identity means having a sense of belonging to a particular group and knowing something about shared experience of groups. Okay, so let's keep the hyphenated Americans thing and go to physical ability identity. Why is it communication related to issues of identity difficult when between non-disabled and disabled? So whenever you see people who are on a wheelchair, you know, how do you actually connote them as? If you see people who have no legs, how do you feel, you know, about people who, how do you perceive people who are like that? I hope that you don't, you don't bring them down, but to actually empathize. What will happen if you are in their position? Because when we talk about physical ability, if it changes over a lifetime. Okay, and people with disabilities see themselves as a cultural group as well. So that if you have a logo, for example, a wheelchair right here, and the parking, there will always be a parking spot at the most closest place to the entrance of a shopping mall, the parking for disabled people. It's a culture as well. Okay, and people with disability struggle to convey a positive identity that they can actually do something as well, and to communicate that their physical ability is only one of their many identities. I might be, for example, I might be in a wheelchair, but I can actually do a great cup of coffee. I'm a great barista. You just don't know that. So things like that. Okay? Religious identity. Why is religious identity a common source of intercultural conflict? Okay, how does religious identity differ from racial or ethnic identity? Before I go more into that, these are explanations and examples I'm giving you for all the social cultural identities. I will give the exact definition in a note or a note document. Okay, so don't worry about that. Okay, coming to religious identity. How does religious identity differ from racial or ethnic identity? What does it mean when someone says I'm Jewish, I practice Judaism, view Jewishness as an ethnic identity? You know, what are the criteria for being a member of a particular religion? Okay, so if how is it different? Sometimes when you come, there's unfortunate instances where different religion, a minority group of people will try to, provoke your culture and your religious identity to become very, very, very protective against it. You become very protective over your religious identity. So, for example, I'm a Muslim, and if I see a video on YouTube, people mocking Muslim, or people other Muslims, or people mocking Islam, or people step on the religious book, which is the Quran, I'll be really mad. So that is my religious identity. It shows according to situations. Okay, so religious identity can actually, especially for Muslim people, you can actually reflect on the way they wear, the way they wear their clothes every day. So, for example, people who wear scarf can be perceived as a Muslim in Malaysia, but it is not a required thing to do. But if your heart is open to wearing a scarf, that's good. So that is an example of religious identity. If people wear scarf, you can actually say that she's a Muslim. How about men who are Muslim in Malaysia? So normally you could not actually tell their religious identity. For example, in Malaysia, if you see a Malay, most probably he is a Muslim. Okay, that's how Malaysia works. If you're Malay, you're a Muslim. Okay, and let me take an example of another example where if a person, a Malay person, wears on an everyday basis, what we call, I don't know, in English we call it a hat, a religious hat, but in Malay we call it ketaya, or if you wear the songkok, right, every day, how do you identify yourself? You are a really extreme practicing Muslim, or you just like to do that, or you identify and you're proud to become a Muslim. It depends. Back on who you are, the way you were being brought up, and the way you see others and the way you see yourself. Okay? And coming to the next one, class identity. Which class of society that you are coming from? Do you think the mobility myth, the belief that with hard work and persistence, any individual can improve his or her class status is alive and well in the US? Sometimes, okay, when you work hard, again, the definition of class identity I will give on a separate note in this section. Okay, so class identity, it depends. Sometimes the myth of working hard and you will become successful is true. It's true. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's true, but it takes years of hard work to actually achieve that. Okay, so it on your luck as well. It depends on the situation. It depends on, for me, when you put your faith in God after you have done all the hard work and let God decide what's best for you, things like that. Okay, so it depends. One result of the mobility myth is that when poverty persists, the poor are blamed. So sometimes there's still poor uh, people who come from a very low class society. Why is it still there is poor people? Okay, so you want to ask that. Okay, and the lack of understanding about class differences and the stereotype perpetuated in the media often make meaningful communication between classes difficult. Sometimes when it is being portrayed in media, for example, if you're from the slums, you will always be from the slums, or in a Malay culture. If you come from the kampong, which is from the village, okay, you will always be a kampong girl. You will never reach to become a high class society. You know, that kind of thinking and ideology makes us to actually understand people from other different classes really difficult. You know, we don't, because we see TV too much, we read magazines, we see what is in the internet. So our understanding towards different classes, are different. So the media is also supposedly to be blamed or not. You answer me. Okay, we have a national identity, an identity associated with a nation, where you're coming from. So what does it mean to become an American? For example, national identity, it influences how we look at the world and communicate with people of other nationalities. It's influenced by how one's country is perceived on the world stage. So for example, I am a Malaysian. I am proud that I have lots of delicious food in Malaysia. We have so many things in Malaysia. That's why we come from multiracial society, and it's the best. You can get the best food in Malaysia. But I'm embarrassed because being a Malaysian, you are associated with 1MDB, for example. Okay, national identity. Okay, personal identity is we are who think we are, but we are also who others think as well. If you think you are unattractive, but others do not, are you unattractive? Okay. So our personal identity is largely defined by outside forces, and our personal identity can come into conflict with other identities as well. Sorry for the interruption. Coming back to personal identity, our personal identity is largely defined by outside forces. That's true. And our personal identity can come into conflict with other identities as well. That's really, really true. Sometimes people say, sometimes you think you're beautiful, you think you're a Slim already, but your brother comes to you and say you're fat, and you you begin to rethink about who you are, whether you're beautiful or not, and things like that. Sometimes it can be conflicted. Okay, so we use the various ways that identity is constructed to portray ourselves as we want others to see us. Okay, so we want to actually control who we are, and we like others to see the good side of ourselves. Okay, the next one, which is multicultural identity. Okay, multicultural people often struggle to reconcile two very different sets of values, norms, worldviews, and lifestyle. Biracial adolescents may identify with one group, both group, or new group. Exposure to more than one culture's norm and value often causes difficulty for biracial children. So, for example, if your mom is a Chinese and your dad is an Indian, then you're a Chindian, it's a mixture of both. Okay, so sometimes you as a child you like to embrace both culture because you come from parents from different cultures, they would like to embrace that, which is good. Most do not find it difficult to manage their competing ethnicity or races and do not feel marginalized. So I have a particular I have a particular student name by the name of Brittany. Brittany is she's a mix of Chinese and Indian, which is Xindian in Malaysia. So it's really, really unique, whereby she looks Indian, but her identification card, her IC, says that she's a Chinese. That's very interesting to actually see. Very, very unique. Okay, so what are the positive aspects of having a biracial identity? If you do, come and share it with me. Okay, and global nomads. What does it mean to be a global nomad? Global nomads is known as third culture kids, grow up in many different cultural contexts. Parents move around and things like that. So I have a friend by the name of Shikara. She lives in Subajaya, whereby her dad is an engineer for Slumberjay back then, whereby she has to move around a lot. From Malaysia, she goes to South Africa, she goes to the UK, India, and so forth. So she's particularly a third culture kid, whereby she grows up in many different cultural contexts that makes her really, really unique. And it's a bit challenging because you come from a different country, you try to cope with different cultures every time when you change countries as well. Okay, and identity and adaptation. Okay, let's go through this section, whereby long-term romantic relationships with members of another ethnic or racial culture and children of foreign-born immigrants may also develop multicultural identity. So, for example, you're a Malay. For example, you're a Malay, you met someone from Indonesia, and you go and live in Indonesia, and you have a child there, and your child can actually choose which nation, which nationality that he wants to belong to when should he reach the age of 18, for example. So it depends back on how you develop your relationship as well will affect the future people. Okay, and the process of adaptation, it is called the U-curve theory, whereby there are three phases in adapting to a new cultural situation. The first one will be excitement. The second one will be culture shock because it's not similar, it's not the same as your culture. And the third phase will be adapt, to adapt individual where to adapt the situation where you are in. That is the Euclid theory. Okay, whereby I will give you an example of a recent case whereby a guy by the name of Ashraf Sinclair. He was a really renowned I wouldn't say he was a particularly a Malaysian artist from the entertainment industry. He married uh an Indonesian singer slash actress, Bunga Citra Lestari. So he shifted himself. He migrated himself to Indonesia. They had a son named Noah, if I'm not mistaken. And Ashraf and Bunga Citra Lestari. Ashraf decided to live in Jakarta with his wife Bunga. So what happened is that he adapted the ways of an Indonesian, whereby he started to speak like an Indonesian and not Malaysian anymore. So, but unfortunately, he passed away really recently. So it was a devastating news for his wife as well because it was a sudden death. Okay, just an example. Okay, living on the border, we have the multicultural identity is defined not by a sense of belonging, but by a new sense of self. We have three types of identity when you have a multicultural identity. You have three types of identity. The first one, an identity that is torn between different cultural identities. often create feelings of ambiguity. Sometimes you're not sure whether you're a Chinese or an Indian or a Chindian. Or constructive identity, an identity that actively negotiated from various cultures and contexts that often create feelings of new multicultural identity. Sometimes you're neither Chinese or Indian, you're a Chindian. So a construct that you made, okay, that there is in the society. An intercultural personhood, people who lives on cultural borders and undergo a gradual process of intercultural evolution known as culture brokers, who can help others see their blind spot and show a way of being in the world. Sometimes there's culture brokers that can actually help you, to fit in the society. I will not go through that a lot or on that a lot. Okay. So what might be some reasons we are not yet living in a post-ethnic society? Because identities do not develop as a smooth process. You try and try to, find who you are throughout time. Identities are created through communication. It is multiple and dynamic. It develops in different ways, in different cultures, in different situations. And identities may be created in social contexts, in relation to group membership as well. And identities are complex and subject to negotiation. In summary, identity, we can't we can't actually call ourselves one particular. We have one only identity in the world. Okay, so that's really really ideal. But to have that is not unique. We could not, we could not differentiate ourselves with each other. So identities are good. Okay, and we go to identity stereotypes, sorry, and prejudice. Okay, so to make sense out of the overwhelming amount of information we receive in everyday's world, we tend to categorize and generalize people, and which that stereotypes come in, which is a widely held beliefs about group of people. We tend to generalize people. Okay, example: Asian Americans are subjected to be positive as a model minority stereotype. So which defines as a stereotype that characterize all Asians and Asian American as a hardworking person, and so a good minority. Sometimes Asians are not hardworking as well, so you tend to stereotype people. Okay. And another one would be prejudice and attitude towards a culture group based on little or no evidence. Sometimes you assume, okay, you assume that a culture group is like that. It's being prejudiced. Okay. And normally negative assumptions. And why do we hold prejudices? The first one will be utilate. This reasons are being conceptualized by the psychologist named Richard Breslin. Okay, so the first one, utilitarian function. Oh, so difficult to pronounce that. Okay, people hold certain prejudice because they can lead to rewards. For example, your friends or family hold prejudices towards certain groups. It'll be easier for you to simply share those attitudes. So, for example, if your mom doesn't like a particular artist, you don't like particular artists too, because you can agree with your mom on something, and your mom will say, "Yeah, you agree with me." She'll be happy. The ego defensive function, second one, people hold prejudice because they don't want to believe unpleasant things about themselves as well. Okay. The third one, the value expressive function, people hold certain prejudices because they serve to reinforce aspects of life that are highly valued. Sometimes you prejudice to a certain group of people because your value, the value of the aspects of life that you value. So, for example, don't touch my $20,000 dining table. Don't do it. I value materialism, for example. And the knowledge function. People hold certain prejudices because such attitudes allow them to organize and structure their world in a way that makes sense to them. Sometimes people are prejudiced because, you know, it makes sense that this kind of people is in a certain works in a certain way. But sometimes you have so many assumptions of a particular group trying to be prejudiced against them, but actually it's not true. So try not to become prejudiced. Okay. And last but not least would be identity and communication. When we talk about identity itself, okay, it has a profound influence on intercultural communication process, whereby sometimes we assume knowledge about another person's group based on his or her membership in a particular cultural group. Especially, there is a particular saying: if you are Malay in Malaysia, you're lazy. So we tend to assume that identity mark, the mark of particular identity. But not all Malays are lazy. Majority of them are not. That phrasing, shouldn't be used anymore. So you tend to be really defensive of your own culture. So nationality, place of origin, education, religion can lead to mistaken conclusions about the person's identity. So nationality of a person, place of origin, education, religion, family, things that you can't touch on a person's, on a person. So try not to provoke people on this particular factors, because that is who they are. Their identity is being developed through these factors: nationality, place of origin, education, and religion, as well as family. So try to be nice with one another and not to stereotype or prejudice against another cultural group. Okay, that is about it for this particular video lecture, and it's a wrap for identity and intercultural communication 1 and 2. It has been an hour that you are with me. Thank you very much for staying on with me as well. So again, if you have questions about identity and intercultural communication 1 and 2, please ask me. It's through our Facebook group or through our Zoom meetings that we will do every week, hopefully. Okay, so thank you very much, and please answer the tutorial under this section as well. There are going to be 2 tutorials. Take time to do one for week 6 and one for week 7. So take your time, and yeah, that's about it. So remember, this particular video lecture is a combination of week 6 and week 7 in one video. So for week 6 and week 7, you only watch one video because it's the same topic. I cover it one whole shot, one go in this particular video. Okay, so thank you very much for watching this particular video. I salute you. Stay safe. The movement through order is being extended. May we stay sane in this difficult times. Thank you very much. Stay safe. Bye bye.